Hey guys, the Common Man here. So I was sharpening up my case knife here, and I decided, you know what? While I've got my whole setup out here, while I'm doing a sharpening, why not just go ahead and shoot a video and show you guys how I sharpen my knives. I am not a professional knife sharpener. I have this Work Pro. It's like a fixed angle sharpening device. Sorry, I'm bumping everything around. Again, not a professional. I am still kind of playing around with sharpening, but I want to show you guys how I do my sharpening. Maybe you can go ahead and take some of the things that I do and apply it to your own knife sharpening. But it's pretty simple and straightforward with this tool here. I really love it. I'd like to get the updated version and see if that works any better, because this isn't perfect, but it does get the job done quite well. So what I do is I go ahead and I put the knife in the clamp. You can center the blade the best you can. I try to make it so that as my rod swings around, it's not like changing angles by dipping or raising really bad. Basically considering, how far out this knife blade goes, because if this knife blade goes all the way out here, then your angle could potentially start getting, basically your angle could start changing the farther out you go. I'm not sure how much it really affects things, but I always just take it into consideration. And then also, if this tip ends like right here, that this stone could actually start dipping down and changing the angle. So anyway, kind of play around with it. Set up the knife in a way where that angle is going to remain somewhat consistent throughout the sweep of this rod. And you do have to kind of monkey around with the positioning and stuff. And then also, this is such a very low profile blade. You want to be careful not to have this blade too far into the jaws, or else you're actually going to just start sharpening your jaws. You don't want to do that. You want to sharpen the edge. So make sure that that edge is far enough out where that stone is making contact with the edge and not making contact with the jaws. Something just to consider with these low profile blades. So what I do before I get sharpening, I move this out of the way. I go ahead and get it clamped, and you can do this before you clamp it up, but go ahead and just give yourself a Sharpie line all the way down to the very edge. Make sure it does get down to the very edge of that blade. We'll go ahead and swing it around. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. And guys, this is so simple. It's really nothing special. This video is not going to be very technical at all. It's just what I do, and it works pretty well. So I went ahead and got that Sharpie mark on there so that it's all totally covered. And the reason you do that is you're going to use that as a gauge. So go ahead and watch how, as I sharpen, you see how that Sharpie is actually being removed. And another thing to consider is if you are first getting your angles set up, I wouldn't use the aggressive stone. Use the lightest stone you have that'll still remove the Sharpie, but very little material, because all we're doing right now is setting the angle. I've already done that with this. Like I said, I got started a little while ago, so I'm using the heavy stone, the 320, to show you guys. But again, use a light stone to set your angle and just start sharpening until you see that Sharpie start to be taken off of that edge, and then you're starting to see some bare metal. Now, what you want is you want that Sharpie to be removed evenly. You don't want Sharpie left down at the very edge, and ideally you don't want too much Sharpie left up at the top either. Because, if you're happy with the angle on the edge that it came with, you want to match it. So you want that Sharpie to be removed evenly. If you're unhappy with the angle, you can change the angle here. So let's say you want something a little more blunt, then you're going to want to start taking more Sharpie off the very edge and leaving a little bit up high. And then in contrast, if you wanted a little bit sharper of an angle, you start taking the Sharpie off the very top of the edge first, leaving a little bit down below until you start removing that Sharpie evenly. Sometimes you have to put a couple of layers of Sharpie to get it dialed in, and just do what you need to do there. But like I said, now I'm at the 320 because I am basically trying to reshape this blade a little bit, and I'm really putting an aggressive sharpening on here. So I just kind of go back and forth, and you do want to be careful not to do one side more than the other, or else you will have an uneven edge. For me, I'm not terribly concerned. This is not a very expensive knife. My thing is I just want to get this thing sharp enough, or sharp enough to be useful. But I will keep checking side to side to make sure I'm not sharpening one side more than the other. A method you could use is to actually count your strokes on each side. I don't generally do that. I just kind of estimate. Another thing you could potentially do is, if you're going to be stroking the same motions and the same speed, you could set a timer. Say you work on this side for this amount of time, and then you flip it over and you do the other side for the same amount of time. Just some ideas on how to keep it consistent. Now I am putting an extra emphasis on the tip here because I do want to put a finer tip. These case knives come with a very, very blunt tip. So I'm trying to remove material until I get a more useful tip there. I'm not trying to make it perfect. I just want it to where it can puncture materials. If I'm trying to, say, open a bag or open a box or something like that. I was very unhappy with the tip on this case knife. And another thing you want to consider is when you set it up in the jaws, maybe try to set it up in a way where you can flip the handle up rather than down, because you'll have to lift the whole apparatus every time you want to flip it around. So I make sure that I do it so that it's oriented where I can flip the handle up, because these jaws only rotate one way. They don't rotate 360 degrees on this particular tool. So now I've done that side, I'm going to move over to this side here, and you can see I put the Sharpie on there, so I'm now removing the Sharpie, and it is being removed the way that I want it, nice and even. Like I said, I'm changing the angle a little bit, but it is what I'm happy with. Another thing to be very, very careful with is when you're up towards the tip, make sure you don't roll off the tip and then hit the tip, because you do have some stone exposed on the side here. If you hit the tip and make a pass on it, you're going to ruin your tip, or at least take a little bit of material off, and it's not what you want. You don't want to harm that tip. When you're up towards the very tip of it, just be very careful and just kind of sweep off the edge in a continued direction. So I mean, I'm pretty happy, I think, with this stone. I think I've gotten what I think I've removed the material that I want to remove with this really, really heavy stone, really coarse stone. So I'm pretty sure I'm ready to switch over to, I think it's 600 would be the next step. Yeah, 600. But let's go ahead and take a look at this and make sure there's no Sharpie remaining up at the tip there. Let's see, that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and rotate it. Now you see that there is Sharpie left at the top of the tip, that top edge of that bevel, and that's okay, because like I said, that Sharpie does get up onto the polished surface a little bit. It's not perfectly on that edge, but also if there's a little bit of that old edge left, it's fine. I'm just reshaping it, and aesthetics are not a concern of mine on this knife. So if you see a little bit of a double edge angle going on, for me, for this purpose, not terribly concerned. If this is a higher end knife, you may want to continue sharpening until you have a consistent edge angle. And always remember, the more you sharpen, the more material you're removing. So ideally, you want to sharpen as little as possible, remove as little material as possible, just to extend the life of your knife. So that looks pretty good. I think I have some work to do up here towards the choil. And there is actually a small sharpening choil here, which is pretty nice to see. But I think I'm happy there. I think I've been pretty consistent on both sides. So let's go ahead and switch to 600. And then really, honestly, guys, as you move down the line in different grits, it's really the same process. In this case, you know, what you can do is you can apply more Sharpie. And actually, I think I might go ahead and do that just for demonstration purposes. Go ahead and apply more Sharpie when you change that stone grit. And what we're going to do is just the same thing. Make sure it's removing at the same angle. Make sure it's removing consistently. But then also the Sharpie is going to show that you've removed enough material. I don't know if anyone in maybe like shop class or wood class, if you went through like a sanding block, or let's say you're working on a project and you needed to sand your components. What we did in wood shop was we would take a pencil and we would draw just squiggly, just wiggly marks, just whatever, crisscross, crosshatch, whatever you needed to. You just put pencil all over your surface that you were sanding, and you sand it until that pencil is completely gone. You'd sand it until you can't see any pencil anymore. And the reason you do that is because that pencil is down in all of the low spots of the wood. It's gotten itself into the low spots. And if you've sanded all of the pencil marks, that means that you've sanded all the way down into those low spots. And you have done basically a a complete sanding job where it's perfectly flat. So I kind of use the same idea here. If you put the Sharpie on there and you've removed all of the Sharpie, it means that you have likely gotten down into the bottom of all of those grooves. And we'll do the same thing over here. Now also keep in mind, different materials, different blade materials are going to take a different amount of time, a different number of passes to sharpen. This is just Case's True Sharp, I think they call it. They're stainless steel, which is a relatively soft steel. I think it's in the maybe low to mid 50s, probably mid 50s as far as HRC goes. And it's going to sand up pretty easy. It strops up extremely easy just because it's a softer material. So it's going to be pretty quick to sharpen. So you can see I'm not having to make too many passes here on each of these grits. I mean, I think we're pretty much already done with the 600. We'll come back over just to make it consistent. I think I spent a little bit more time on that other side there. And as far as the pattern goes, the way that I'm sharpening, I try to do crisscrossing. If you notice that I'm kind of changing directions, I do that because I think it's a more efficient cut when you cut across those grooves that you've made. So when you sharpen this way, you're making grooves go this way. When you sharpen this way, you're making grooves go that way. When you start crisscrossing, those grooves are going to really start, basically the grit is going to really be more efficient, I think, in taking down those grooves that you've created. And then I try to end with like a full pass if you can. You see I'm starting all the way at the back and then finishing at the very front. I try to do that just to keep everything sort of consistent. And I'll do the same thing over here. I'll do a couple of passes like that. And as you get down to your finer grits, you will want to start considering the way that the edge is going to look. And what I mean by that is that if you've got crisscrossing paths, it can show up in the edge. Again, in this knife, I'm not terribly concerned. I just went to the 320. Don't do that. Go another 600 just to get rid of those marks that I just made. When you get down into your finer grits, you'll want to consider those paths of the cutting of the grit, because it will show up, like I said. So what I do once I get down to like my ceramic is I start doing kind of the same direction, and then I will finish. If I'm sharpening a really nice knife that I really care what the edge looks like, I'll actually go almost perfectly straight with my paths, so that way the cutting grooves are all sort of consistent and it looks neat. And then, you know, if you're doing a mirror polish, you'll basically eventually get to the point where you shouldn't see any of the grooves created by the grit. And this system, I don't have the stones to get a mirror polish, but it does end up looking pretty nice, especially when you finish off with this. I'm not sure what grit this is, but this is a ceramic. And then when you strop it up, you get not a mirror polish, but it's a pretty nice shine on the polish. So it does end up looking quite nice. I mean, that's pretty good, guys. I really don't have to do too much with this True Sharp material. This stuff is quite soft, so it sharpens up really nicely. This is actually a very, very satisfying sharpening. When I'm sharpening like a Magna Cut or a 20 CV or S45 VN, something like that, one of those more premium, harder steels, man, you could be here for a long time. I mean, sometimes it takes me, if I'm really having to reprofile a blade, it could take me 45 minutes sometimes. It's crazy. And that's also because I'm not very experienced in knife sharpening. I may not be doing this exactly right, but it can take a while. I think that's just the nature of those blade steels. Just much, much harder to sharpen a very hard blade steel. So, I mean, I think that's pretty good, guys. I don't want to pull it out of the jaws just yet until I have a really good look at that edge. But you can see it's got a pretty decent shine on that edge there. I'm not seeing any Sharpie left at the very tip, or rather the very apex of that edge. And go ahead and feel it with your fingers. Yeah, that's quite sharp. That's good. Another thing you can do, take your fingernail and check for a burr. Now, if you're using like a ceramic stone on both sides pretty evenly, you shouldn't have too much of a burr forming, when you're using the more high grit or heavy grit sandpapers, you will feel a burr. But this here, this is really, and that's kind of what this is doing, is sort of knocking down any burr that's still there. So I think I'm pretty happy with that edge. I'm going to pull out a camera so I can have a really good close look at it. Yeah, guys, that's pretty great. So we're going to go ahead and just call it. I'm going to pull it out of the vise here. And remember, once you take it out of here, you've lost your angle. This, unfortunately, is not a perfect system. It doesn't have this perfect angle memory. Don't trust the angle markings there. It's close, but it's not going to be exact. And you know, the profile of the blade is going to change those angles dramatically. So we've got it off of there. Now let's go ahead and run it across my strop. So this is basically just a piece of leather with a stropping compound, which is like a polishing compound. And basically, I just get the angle close. I'm not perfect with the angle, but just kind of get that angle to where you're sort of flat on that sharpened edge and just pull it through a bunch of times. And you'll want to do, you know, roughly the same number of passes on both sides. Try to keep that angle consistent. You want to be careful not to get the angle too high, because you'll actually start taking away your edge. You don't want the angle too low, because then you're just going to be riding on the very top edge of your sharpened edge, or the very top portion, and you're not going to be tuning your very apex of that edge. All right, so I think that's been a few more on that side. We'll do a few more on this side. And this strop is starting to get pretty beat up, so I'm probably almost ready for a new one. I've kind of abused this thing. I didn't really have a ton of experience when I first got it, so yeah, it's a little messed up, but that's okay. Gets the job done. This is just my cleaning rag. So, and then you'll also notice, which is kind of cool, when you strop it, you do remove some of that excess Sharpie up at the very top edge. And you just take a little bit of cleaning oil or something with a rag, and it'll remove all that Sharpie right off of there. So don't worry about the Sharpie messing up your blade. It's not going to. But I think I'm pretty happy with that edge. Yeah, we're shaving hairs for sure. Definitely shaving hairs. That's great. Make a couple more passes on here. I like to do long sweeps across the strop. I just feel like it's more efficient that way if you do long strokes. Very good. Give it one last wipe, and then let's see if we have a piece of paper to go ahead and check the sharpness here. I do. Let's see what we got. Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm very happy with that. Look at that. This top of this page is even bent over a little bit, and it's still just slicing it like it's nothing. So that's it, guys. That's pretty easy, pretty simple. Again, this is that kind of fixed angle Worksharp sharpener. Maybe I'll go ahead and leave a link in the description, but they do have an updated version of this you may want to check out. Not super expensive, under $100, or I guess the whole kit. If you get the whole kit, it's a little over $100, but it's well worth the money if you are sharpening knives frequently and if you care to have a really good sharpening on your knife. So anyway, thanks guys. That's it. Hopefully you've enjoyed. If you liked it, go ahead and leave a like, leave comments if you think I'm doing something not quite right, or if you have any suggestions for me, I'd really appreciate that. And if you want to see more of my knife and EDC content, please consider subscribing. I appreciate it.